Welcome back on this glorious Thursday. I wanted to make this video because I'm working with 6th and 7th grade MYP 1 and 2 for those who are in the American system, be social studies grades 6s and 7. And it was unique, surprising, and a rewarding experience because this was the first time my students had ever seen a political cartoon. And I think it's important for those, especially for us in social studies. I've taught AP and I've taught it mostly at the high school level. And I've used a variety of political cartoons and been using images for a very long time now, but this was the first time I really had to take baby steps to do it at a middle school level. And so I want to make this video to kind of show how I did it. And surprisingly, I say surprisingly because this was the first time I taught it at this grade level, with this type of a, shall we say, source, this type of historical document that my students have never really seen, and they had to make sense of it. And so anyway, I want to break it down by first go ahead and sharing the screen by showing what I did. This is feeding off of a unit I did on the Pampas, which is an Argentinian region. And we did a debate on who the land belongs to. And we moved from that biome and the impact of human environment to this region. And this region specifically is the Congo. So we used inquiry at the beginning, of course. Where is the Congo? Have you heard of the Congo? Just discussing what they knew about it. I showed them a map. And then I wanted them to look at some images. And so I had produced a variety of images just to get them thinking about the region. And they established right away that it is a rainforest region, what they knew about the rainforest, what types of animals are there, and what types of resources they think were there, and whether it's poor, rich, what have you. And what the recommendation was, at least in terms of the curriculum, was to approach it from a short video that looks at the Congo and then use a political cartoon. And what I wanted to do is look at this activity for the political cartoon first, then show the political cartoon, then show how I built it up, and then applied the political cartoon into the Congo so that they had to produce one. And what I plan to do, with time permits, is maybe show some results of some of the political cartoons that they had made for me. So in any case, this was the activity. After we had discussed the inquiry and looked at the video and looked at different aspects of the Congo, they then had to look at a political cartoon, which I want to put up here. Now, this is the first time they had ever seen a political cartoon, and they kind of laughed. I mean, I didn't really expect that reaction. I thought that, you know, looking at it, it would, I guess it would kind of resonate, or maybe they would see the connection, but they had really never seen anything like this. And that made me take a step back and say, okay, how am I going to approach this? So I have kind of revised the lesson to kind of show, but when you use a political cartoon, start with, I recommend anyways, starting with the basics. So I have the first question here, details. Get the obvious out. When they're looking at a political cartoon, all the details that they can gather from it, okay? And every detail is important, as we know. Those of us who taught political cartoons and the significance of the message, they need to get all of those details out. So they were able to establish that there's a snake, that there's a coil, that there's a figure here, that there's someone here. They instantly said, oh, it's a mom with a baby. And I said, well, don't assume that. We know that we can assume maybe it's a woman because we see a somewhat kind of a dress, and then we see something in her arms that looks like a baby. They said, oh, well, it's her baby. And I told them not to make that assumption yet. I wanted to get that out there right away because there could be a lot of different interpretations here, and that's the point. A political cartoon can be interpreted in many ways. They noticed the head, as you see, I'm circling with my cursor with a crown on it, okay? So they were trying to use assumptions, but I said, you know, again, I went back to don't say that yet. And then I said, look at the details around it. If you look in the background, we got a house, we got a tree, and I told them to look at the tree. What kind of tree do you see? I know it's black and white, but what can you visualize in your mind? The types of plants around here, okay? And then without showing them the title, which I have here at the bottom, once we were to get all of these details out, then I went on to the next, which is the obvious. We know it's in the Congo, but where in the Congo, and how do you know? So what are some other details they see? Well, some were able to figure out, or at least look, that there's some kind of water here. Okay, are there rivers in the Congos? Are there lake in the Congo? Is it attached to an ocean by land? Okay, because Congo geographically is in the middle, but in the old Congo, they have a land that, they have a piece of land that actually connects to the Atlantic Ocean, which we'll get to later. But in any case, looking at the political cartoon, once they have all of that down and they have established those details, now who is the head of the snake? This is where I introduce at the bottom. Most political cartoons will give you a background of where the source is coming from. That is provided here at the bottom. And you see in the rubber coils, a political cartoon about King Leopold. Paused it there. Who is King Leopold? Simple research, they were able to tell me he was the king of Belgium. At one period of time, he colonized the Congo region in order to exploit the people to get resources to make money. Now, with leaving the colonization, the exploitation part out, this half that gives you the history, I left out. I didn't want students to see that because I wanted them to try to figure out the cartoon first, and I think that's important. If you're working with political cartoons, have them look at the image first, break it down, all the little details, and once they have that, then you can get into the history part and start to make those connections. And I think that's going to be a more effective way. At least it worked for me. So now we get, what is the message of the cartoon? Okay. Once they have all of those details, I put them into groups. Okay. You have all of these little pieces of the puzzle, put it together. What is the message here? And believe it or not, they were playing detective. That's kind of how I worked the lesson and in terms of making them think critically, putting those ideas together. What is the message? What's going on here? And they did quite well. Once they gave me their ideas, I said, well, let's check. Then I provided the history, which you see in half here. So if you're working with political cartoons, I recommend not just to have the political cartoon, but to have one that provides a history, a background, something that they can use their prediction to kind of match to see if they were correct. And then they can compare and contrast. Okay, oh, I got this part correct, or oh, you know, I missed it by this much, or what have you. At least it reassures them their predictions that they're making about the political cartoon. So in any case, we talked a little bit about colonialism. I highlighted some important words that they needed. In this context, they talk about exploitation twice. Okay, and I said usually in a short history like this, if they mention a word like that twice, what does that mean? Is that important? Is that significant? We went into those conversations. And so where do we go from here? Once we had the political cartoon, they understood the background. Now we need to look at the present day of the Congo, considering that this is the past. So I have this chart here. We looked at 6 different human environmental, if you will, issues that are happening in the Congo. So I broke it down into groups of 3. Each had to research 2. They had to explain what the problem was and then provide an image in the Congo that relates to the problem. Okay, they had to present it to their group. Then I selected a handful of students who, based on observation, I felt would be able to explain it to the class. And then that encouraged a conversation, a discussion as a class. And this was nearing the end of the period, so this might take 2 periods for those that are trying to use time management to figure out how long this is going to take. So once we had the 6 issues, they were able to research them. We were able to have a conversation about the least, or at least the issue they feel is the least impactful and the one that they feel is the most impactful, okay? Based on that, then they had to recreate this political cartoon, except they had to select one of, as you see in the activity here, one of these 6 issues that you see on the screen, okay? With one of those 6 issues, and they could pick one that a partner did if they feel that one was more significant than the one they researched. Then they had to take a sheet of paper. I gave them an A/4. I had them divide it in half with a ruler. And then on one half, they had to write political cartoon. And on the other half, they had to write a history. Okay. And the history was not necessarily going all the way back to colonialism, but just a recent history about why these issues are impacting the Congo today. Okay. First, I would recommend strongly make them focus on the history. The reason is this. I taught it in reverse order. We started with the political cartoon, then looked at the history. Make them start with the history so that there's something written. What I found was with the history written down, then they could look at that history and it helped them establish a better idea of what to illustrate for their political cartoon. And that's what they had to do here. Okay, for a final paragraph, you see 3 here. I had one to explain in 3 to 4 sentences what they drew and how it connects to their particular issue and why it's a problem. And the results I got were pretty phenomenal. I'm actually going to make another video showing some of the results that I got, but they were able to make that connection. And some of their political cartoons, although not perfect because this is the first time they're doing it, they were able to really be creative and coming up with connecting what they wrote as a history and a summary of what they did and connect to some type of a political cartoon. In any case, this is what worked for me. I think it was a really good lesson. It gets them thinking critically, and in terms of the IB, I was able to point to those ATLs and say, hey, you know, what were some of those ATLs that we were able to really stress today? Critical thinking was probably the biggest one in terms of dissecting and really trying to figure out what the political cartoon was and thinking of their own political cartoon. But there were other ATLs in this one, but critical thinking, I think, was the most important one. So if you're thinking of doing a critical thinking exercise with your students, working with political cartoons, I recommend this one. I think that it worked really well. Again, whatever you can get from this video and whatever you can get from teaching, make the best of it. Try to make the students have a fun and learning experience, and hope you got something from this. So take care.